Hi everyone, and welcome to our second tutorial into the PopNet world part 1. Instead of doing another PopNet tutorial like fireworks or falling particles, I want to show you something different, like recreating my energy flow project that I have done in processing. We are going to explore and use particles to draw these organic lines, like these ones. Add some color, so we don't work just in black and white. And use images to draw and guide our particles, like these ones or this one. In this first part, we are going to understand the basic principles of programming and learn how to add and edit a simple noise force to our particles. Then we are going to generate trails to create these organic flows. Before we start, I want to explain some basic programming knowledge that you will need to understand in order to keep following these tutorials. This knowledge will be useful for everything you do in the computer graphics world. You are in constant use of it if you work in processing, Houdini, Unity, Espresso in Cinema 4D, or even in any shaders graph or render like Octane or RenderShift. I will keep things simple, so don't be afraid. If you already know this, you can skip to the tutorial. So, you have a few different types of values. String is for text. You can put anything inside a string. Even if you put a number, it will read as text. Then you have numbers. You have integer or int, that is a number without decimals. And you have float number, that is a number with decimals. Even this is a float number. Then you have array list, that is a list of some values of the same type. You can have an array list of string or an array list of int or float. To access a value inside the array list, you need to use the index. For example, if you want this value, you start counting the indexes starting from 0, always starting from 0. And then you have vectors. Vectors are kinda like array lists, but with only 2 or 3 values. But instead of using index number, you use x, y, and z. Now, I want to explain how to convert these values switching their types, because you are using a lot of these functions in programming. Starting with strings, you can convert anything to a string, but the other way around is more complicated. You need to check each character and then convert one by one if possible. Int to a float is easy, you just add 0.0 to the number. Float to int has some tricks. If you have this number, converting to int will cut everything after the comma. You can use round functions to control the math. If you use round, it will round looking at the decimals and it will give you the exact int. If you use round ceil, it will always give you the number above, and if you use round floor, it will give the number below. So, let's start our tutorial. In this project, we are going to use simple curl noise to move our particles. Something like this, but we want to use something in 2D. So we are going to edit our curl noise, so we only work in 2D to have something like this. So let's begin. Create a new project, place a geonode, and call it particle system. Dive in and place a circle. We want to work on the floor, so let's change the orientation to Z and X plane. Then let's just scatter some points. And as you may see, you have points all over the circle, but we want to use only the edge. So on the circle node, we are going to change the primitive type to NURBS curve. So we have a spline, and then our scatter points will only scatter in the spline on the edge. And then place a pop network. Select and dive in. As you remember on previous tutorial, let's go to the pop source and change the emission type to all points. So we are using the points we create before. Right now, if I press play, it won't work. It's just emitting particles on the same position. Let's add our scroll noise. We are going to use a pop so we can control the particles inside. So dive in and we have these two nodes. Here are the attributes for each particle. So inside of this pop-up we are working each particle. So we have the attributes from each particle and the output that controls the position, velocity, force, color and normal. Let's place our friend scroll noise. This is a function with some attributes from scroll noise. Changing each attribute can create different looks, like this example from Entagma and this one. So let's give the position to the scroll noise. This will know where is the position, where is the particle inside the scroll noise. And let's use that value that we are getting from the noise to the velocity. So let's place an add node. Velocity. We have the velocity from our particle, and let's add the noise. Then we have our velocity with the scroll noise, and then let's wire this to the velocity output. If we press play, our particles are going crazy. Right now the scroll noise is way too strong. Let's just dial this a little down. So let's put just 0.2 so you can see it better. See? So each particle, depending on the position, is getting a value from the scroll noise, from black to white, and it's getting that value and adding to the velocity. Oops. Okay. We can control a lot of things on the scroll noise. We can reduce the frequency, like 0.2, 0.2 to everything, and it will change the scale of the scroll noise. I'm getting something, right? Look at this. If you increase this, it will work as the opposite. It will have a larger scale, so it will have a lot of scrolls, a lot of noise. So the smaller the frequency, the more organic look and uniform you will have, like this. One thing I like to do is to have a constant to control the frequency. Instead of always dialing the same number over and over, I like to add a constant, float, that is a float number, convert this float to a vector, float to vector, and I want the same value for x, y and z, and place this vector on the frequency. Right now, if I change this to 0.5, it will give the frequency 0.5, and it will always use these values. So right now it's 0.5. If I put 0.1, oops, 0.1, It's just one way to control my frequency without dialing always the same number. So right now we are using and adding velocity on the 3-axis, right? And we want something 2D, so we are going to do some math on this velocity. Right now we have a velocity that is something like this. Of course we do smaller values, right? But this will work on 3D. And we want to convert the y value to 0. So how we do that? It's simple math. We have this vector, right? 3, 2, 5. And we are going to multiply by 1, 0, 1. And it will give you a new vector that will be 3 times 1, 1, 0, and 5. This way, we have a new velocity that is only using two axes. So let's do this math on Houdini. Quite simple. Let's place a vector, a constant. Write constant. Change it to vector. And as I explained, we want 1 on x, 0, and 1 on z. And we are going to multiply. Simple as that. We are going to get the velocity multiplied by this constant, and then wire this multiply value to the output. If you do this, we are going to have our particles always on the floor, because we are not adding velocity on the y-axis. Simple as that. Right now we have a problem. Our velocity is starting with 0 and going slowly, and at the end they are having a lot of velocity. They are with super speed. Why is that? Because every frame we are adding a value, a new value. So our velocity is starting by 0, 0.3, 0, 0.5. After a few frames, our velocity will be 3 point something, 0, 5 point something. And the next frame will be higher and higher. So our speed is going this way, the next one is this vector, and this one is going to be this vector. But I want to control the velocity so it won't increase this much. So we are going to normalize. What I mean by that is that we have this speed, then the next one is this big, and if we normalize, we'll have a vector, same direction, but with the length of 1. This is math, simple math, right? We are still getting the right directions, but controlling the force and the length of the velocity. So for that, we are going to normalize. And then link. Let's put it here. So as you see, our particles are always at the same distance from the previous ones, because the velocity is always below 1, the length of it, I mean. So right now we have a lot of particles, if I go up a few levels, let me just place a null just so we can see the geometry sheet. So right now we have 218 particles. Go this, we'll have 240 particles. Okay, but we don't want to use that. We want to create trails, and instead of using a lot of particles, we are just going to emit particles on the first frame, and then create trails. First, we are going to dive in PopNet. Remember, as the previous tutorial, we are going to change this birth. We are going to use expression. I'm going to use the big one so the beginners will understand what we are doing. Frame number equals to 1. If this statement is true, then gives the value 0. If it is false, then gives 0. Like this, it will only emit on the first frame. But now we lost all the trails, right? But we are going to use trail node, sorry. With this trail, instead of preserve original, it will do the same as the PopNet. It will create the particles, but we want to connect as polygons. Okay, let's increase the trail length, so it will use all the frames. So in this case, 40. But right now, our trails are quite ugly because we have closed rows turned on. What it's doing is, oops, you have a curve, right? A trail. The closed rows is creating polygons along the spline, but then is closing the first point to the last point to the first. So if you have this, it's going to create a mesh with this, and we want only the spline, not closing. That's why we uncheck these closed rows. So right now we have our particles system. Are getting there. Just a few nodes to change the look. You can come into PopFop. As I said, you can control the noise frequency as you want. Then you just need to play with the amplitude and these values. See? Much better. Another look. Let's crank this up. 0.75. Now it's just your taste. You just play with it as much as you want. I like more organic stuff, so I'm going to decrease this and reduce the roughness. I'll play now. Much better. More organic stuff. One thing I did to control the particles inside the circle, I just placed an attractor. Try with 2 T's. And I'm assuming you already know what this does, because if you come from Cine 4D, you use a lot of these effects with MoGraph. Just have a point. Right now it's on 0, 0, 0. In our case, on the center of the circle. And if we leave the force scale to 1, it will attract all the particles to that point. our pop force. Our scroll noise is way too big. Let's crank this up. See, it's pushing and attracting all the particles. But in our case, I want to do the opposite of attract. Instead of going with the positive numbers, let's go with negative values, so it will repel the particles. Right now the force is way too strong. Now you just give the values you want for your look. It's simple as that. One thing I like on this attract is that you can control the distance it will affect the particles. For example, if I put only 2, let me just use the pop birth to 1 so we can see inside the PopNet. Okay. Right now, let me crank this a lot higher. Okay, right now, if I change the maximum distance to 2, when the particles leave that distance from -2 or 2 in a circle, they won't be affected by the attractor. So, as you see, when they get outside the circle with 2 distance, it will get the scroll noise. So that way we can control the organic loop like an eye on the center and then have the scroll noise outside. Let's go back and change our bird to our statement, so only emitting particles on the first frame, and then voila. And here you have our trail system with a simple scroll noise, with simple math, working and editing the scroll noise. We have our trail system. I'm just going to give you a little extra, show you what you can do with this stuff. I love these graphics, this organic look. And now I'm going to change the background to dark so you can see our trails. And let's play with this and create a growing structure. No, I don't see. We are converting the y velocity to 0, so it is working only on 2D. It's neat on every frame. So right now it's like this, right? In 2D, always on the floor. Because we are turning off the y velocity. If I turn this back on, now we are adding the y velocity. It's creating something like this. Let's try and create a growing structure going up and up. We can do this in different ways, as much as you like. For example, you have this velocity. Let's add a constant. Let's call it I up. And let's increment 0.2. We are going to turn this float to a float, this float to a vector, as we did before. Float to vector, but in this case we want the vector to be 0. Add this number on the y, then 0 on the x. Then we are going to add this new vector, in our case 0 on x, 0.2 on y, and 0 on z. and we are going to add this new vector to our velocity. So right now our points are going up always with the same value. Okay, add the viewport the other way right now. Okay, so as you see, our structure is going up and up. Let's crank this up. Now you have a growing structure, right? But now all our particles have the same y, and we are using a noise. Instead of using the always the same number to the velocity, we can still use the curl noise y velocity. But as I explained, if we use that, some particles will go up. I wired the wrong one. So some particles will go up and others down. How we can control this? Again, with simple math. Let me search for an empty space. So we have a vector, right? Sometimes it go up, sometimes go down. This is the floor. How do we control these vectors that are going down to go up? There's the absolute function. This will always give you the positive number of the number, right? If you have -3, it goes to 3. If you have 4, it will stay 4. Okay? If you have -5 and you convert with absolute, it will give you 5. So we are going to use the value we get from the y position and use the absolute to get always the positive value. Then use that one to convert to add to our velocity. So right now we have the velocity and we want to control and use that y here. So let's get the vector to float. Vector to float. I placed it wrong. Vector to float. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go up so we can see the new math. So this way we can get access to the x, y, and z. Okay, let's zoom in. So we have the velocity and we have the x, y, and z. Now we want to get to y and use absolute, and then use this absolute value on this float to vector, because this is a float now, right? So we are going to use this absolute to a vector. Then, as we did before, let's put this up here. We are going to add that new I velocity to our previous one. So we are going to add previous and the new, and then turn on. As you may see, everything is going up with the curl noise. Okay. So right now, how do you use this to transform to a structure or something? I'm not going to explain in detail on this tutorial. Right now is calculating all the trails for all the noise, so I'm pressing ESC. So we have our PopNet, our particles, and just create a VDB from particles, wire this in, let's change the point radius scale. Maybe it's 0.05. Okay, so now you have a new structure with curl noise. Just an extra to show you what you can do with this simple PopNet. As simple as that, as simple as a curl noise that we edit our values. Right now, instead of using the y velocity from the curl, I'm just using the constant we created before. I'm doing something. Oh yeah, I was doing something wrong. Okay, we need to convert the float to vector before adding to the vector. We have this structure, convert to VDB, and then convert from VDB to polygons. Change this to polygons, and there you have a nice structure. Okay, that's it for this first part. With this simple PopNet we can achieve different looks and even create growing structures. Feel free to play with it and don't forget to share with us your results. For the next tutorials we are going to keep exploring the PopNet and learn how to add more details and rules to our particles. Before we end this video I want to say thank you to our patrons for all the support. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check our Patreon page. With your support we can keep doing these tutorials to help the community. Hope you enjoyed this video and see you next week.